I'm going to read a poem that some people have probably heard before. It's having to do with your past catching up to you in the most interesting places. I was in New York City doing a reading. I came down to Washington Square Park. And you know how Washington Square Park got all these people, and people are doing tricks and, comedy and all kind of things. And then I saw somebody I never thought I would see in Washington Square Park, of all places. So this is the poem about meeting the animal in Washington Square Park. The acrobats were out in Washington Square Park, flaying arms and colors, the jokers and breakdancers, the singers and mimes. I pulled out of a reading at New York City College and watched a crowd gathering around a young man jumping over 10 garbage cans from a skateboard. Then out of the side of my eye, I saw someone who didn't seem to belong here, like I didn't belong. He was a big man, 6 feet and more, with tattoos on his arms, back, stomach, and neck. On his abdomen were the words in huge Old English lettering, Hazard. I knew this guy. I knew that place. I looked closer. It had to be him. And it was. Animal from East LA. World heavyweight contender. The only Chicano from LA ever ranked in the top 10 of the division. The one who went toe-to-toe with Leon Spinks and even made Muhammad Ali look the other way. Animal, I yelled. Who the f*** are you, he asked, a quart of beer in his grasp, eyes squinting. My name's Louis from East LA. He brightened. East LA, here in Washington Square Park. Man, we everywhere. But then the proverbial what part of East LA came next, and I gave him a shock. From La Garrity, I said, that's the mortal enemy of the Big Hazard gang. I should kill you, Animal replied. Hey, if we were in LA, I suppose you would, but we in New York City, man. I should kill you anyway. Instead, he thrust out his hand with the beer and offered me a drink. We talked about what had happened since he had stopped boxing, about the time I saw him at the Cleaning House Arena looking over some up-and-coming fighters, how he had been to prison and later ended up homeless in New York City with a couple of kids somewhere. And there he was with a mortal enemy from East LA talking away. I told him how I was now a poet doing a reading at City College, and he didn't wince or look surprised. Seemed natural. Sure, a poet from East LA, that's the way it should be. Poet and boxer, drinking beer among the homeless, the tourists and acrobats, mortal enemies. When I told him I had to leave, he said go then, but soon shook my hand East LA style and walked off. Maybe someday you'll do a poem about me, eh? Sure, Animal, that sounds great. Someday I'll do a poem about you. I got another one kind of a strange poem, I think. I don't know. There was a time when I was in Chicago, people were trying to locate me, and about 3 people did this. They would actually go look for my name in the phone directory. In Chicago, there's 4 or 5 pages, I don't know how many pages, of Luis Rodriguez's in the phone directory. And I'll tell you what's even sad. I'm like second to the bottom of that list. So one time, this guy called and he said that he went through the whole list, called everybody on there, finally got to me. So I always think, well, if he's going to go to that trouble, I better listen to what he has to say, which may not have been a smart thing to do, but this poem comes from that conversation I had with this guy. I never heard from him again, but I just thought the conversation deserved a poem. And it's called, it may not mean much to anybody, but I think you'll get what's happening here. I still don't know what he was talking about, but the poem is called Eva Sitting on the Curb with Pen and Paper Before the Torturers Came to Get Her. That's one of the things he said, so that gives you an idea of what's happening. The phone call came on a night of a bruising battle with my computer, breathing out some scathing word art. It was from a man who claimed to be the king of poetry, and it wasn't Robert Haas, just so you know. His first words were, "Are you beauty who wants to be true?" And I thought, sure, why not? People have said worse. I am king because I understand eternal harmony with infinite beauty, he continued. And who was I to argue? Truth cannot be against the lie is against the truth. I was with him so far. Then he spoke about Eva. A perfect poet, he claimed, an angel born for it, and how she was incarnate ecstasy, light of the absolute. He kept on with reminiscence, fragments, and epiphanies, including one about a 7-year-old Mexican girl he spotted from a fire escape in the barrio. They will kill her before she is 17, he declared. And I agreed. This too is true. He talked about writing a book for the universal child, how he had eclipsed his Italian background to be human, and how those youth in jail love death, to be with the dead ones who can't hurt them. He appeared to surpass even this, the real, the cold, the brutal tongues licking us to sleep. Here was a Dante for our times, whose mythical Eva rouses poetry from his quilted slumber. Here was a concrete Buddha, challenging even me to drink from the chalice of my own gifts. You are on your knees, stand up, he yelled, before hanging up his words like wings to cross the battered skies of all illiteracies. I thought I would do a poem about poetry. And this is about the certain kind of poetry that I kind of had a little apprenticeship in. I moved to Chicago in 1985. And around that time, the poetry slam scene was happening in Chicago. It seemed to be kind of good that it came together around the same time. And because there was all this performance poetry happening, and all these people getting up and reading poetry, and I learned a lot in the process of just reading. I don't really do slams so much, but I just like that whole process of people just getting up and reading. And in those days in Chicago, it was happening every day. There was, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 places to go for poetry every night. Libraries, bars, a lot of bars, cafes, just everywhere. And I would go to as many as I could, and every once in a while I would get up and read, but mostly I was listening. And the interesting thing is, somebody calls it the democratization of poetry, but the thing about that, unfortunately or fortunately, is that you have to go through a lot of bad poetry. And it's just natural to the thing, I guess. I don't know. People get up and just read, and most of it's not that hot. But every once in a while, though, it's worth it when somebody gets up and reads a poem that really knocks you on your butt. You know what I mean? That really gets you. That's almost makes it the whole worthwhile. And maybe because we're all drinking beer and wine and everything else and whiskey, maybe all poems start sounding good after a while. But this is a poem about finding somebody that did that, and it's called Don't Read That Poem. She rises from a chair and slides toward the stage with satin feet over a worn wood floor. She bears down on the microphone like a blues singer, about to reveal some secrets, a fever of poems in her hand. She seizes the mic and begins her seduction. I'm in the back of the bar, my head down. The things she does to me with words. I want to leave. I want her never to begin. She starts with a poem about daddy love, and I feel like getting up right there and yelling, "Don't read that poem." The one that causes little bursts of screams inside my head, that makes tears come to my eyes that I refuse to let fall. Don't read that poem. The one about a daughter raped and killed in a shadow of a second's dark fury. I want to hide in the neon glare above me, to swim away in the glass of beer I hold close to me. She does another poem about her many mouths, and I want to howl. Don't read that poem, the one that entices me to crawl under her skin, to be her heartbeat. Oh, how she plucks the right notes, rendering me as clay in bruised hands. No, don't do the one about what it is to be a 9-year-old black girl, the truth of it trembling at my feet. Somebody should make her stop. I should be home, watching TV, blank-eyed behind stale headlines, cold popcorn on the couch, a dusty turntable going round and round and round. I should be fixing a car or shooting 8-ball, but I can't leave. I need to taste the salt of her soliloquy, to be drunk with the sobriety of her verse quaking beneath my eyelids. I want to do a poem in Spanish, and even if you don't know Spanish, it's okay. I just think it's good to throw a Spanish poem every once in a while. This is a poem I wrote. It's called Pedazo por Pedazo. Pedazo por pedazo te desgarra, pelándote capas de tu ser, mintiendo sobre quién eres, hablando por tus sueños. En el escuador de sus ojos tú eres un criminal, vistiéndote en una chaqueta de mentiras, hecho de acero a la medida. Tú eres su retrato perfecto. Quítatelo, haz tu propio manto, desafía a los interrogadores, mira bien la muerte en su mirada, di que no los rindirás, Di que no los creerás cuando te nombren de nuevo. Di que no aceptarás sus reglas, sus colores, sus morales depravados. Aquí tienes un camino. Aquí puedes cantar en la victoria. Aquí no eres una raza conquistada, la víctima perpetua, un rostro sombrío en la tormenta. Manos, mente están esculpiendo un santuario. Usa estas armas contra ellos. Usa tus talentos dados. No son de piedra. And I think I'll be a nice person and read you the English translation of that. Okay. It's called Piece by Piece. Piece by piece, they tear at you, peeling away layers of being, lying about who you are, speaking for your dreams. In the squalor of their eyes, you are an outlaw, dressing you in a jacket of lies, tailor-made in steel. You fit their perfect picture. Take it off. Make your own mantle. Question the interrogators. Eyeball the death in their gaze. Say you won't succumb. Say you won't believe them when they rename you. Say you won't accept their codes, their colors, their putrid morals. Here you have a way. Here you can sing victory. Here you are not a conquered race, perpetual victim, the sullen face in a thunderstorm. Hands, minds, they are carving out a sanctuary. Use these weapons against them. Use your given gifts. They are not stone. I'm really honored to be here. You know, 22 years ago, I was actually walking these streets and these, you know, what we call them, corridors, and I was part of the summer program for minority journalists at the journalism program. It no longer exists. And I think part of the reason, I'm guessing here, is because a lot of radical minority, well, they call them minorities, but you know, journalists of color came out of it. And almost every one of them, not almost, a lot of them got fired or quit because it was really hard to be a thinking, you know, inquisitive journalist in the kind of journalism that we're in. And I was one of those people. I lasted maybe 2.5 years in the newspaper before I had to quit. And, but I'm really glad, and I've been here coming over the years, but it was a very important time for me, and I'm really glad to be back here to read to you and to see all you here. I'm going to read a poem by request. This is, as Robert Haas mentioned, I do have a poetry press called Tia Chucha Press, and it's based in Chicago, but we're going to open up an LA section of it. And we've been doing, I guess we got about 35 books now and a CD, and we're constantly trying to look for new work, even though it's really hard. Money's pretty hard to get. We don't got no money, to be honest with you, but we keep trying anyway. And then when I moved to LA, we got this idea to do this bookstore, coffee shop, art gallery, performance space called Tia Chucha's Café Cultural. And it's been open for a year now. And this is a very important development considering that there are co-communities and as you know, but in LA it's kind of a strange thing because it is the media entertainment capital of the world, and and I happen to move into this part of the valley that's the northeast side of the valley they call the Mexican side. It's 400,000 people, 80% Mexican or Central American, and there was not one bookstore, not one movie house, not one culture center. And it's worse in South Central and it's worse than East LA. Here you are in the media entertainment capital of the world. So we created the space and it's become a very vibrant, important gathering place for ideas, for books, for art, for writing, for poetry. Just people are coming together. Yesterday they had an all-day peace kind of a gathering place there because the kids were walking out of the high schools, and the teachers came to us and says they're going to walk out, but we don't want them to get arrested or just hanging out and not know where to go, so we suggested have them come to Tia Chucha's. And I haven't heard the latest, but apparently they brought in some theater group, they have films to show them, they have a dialogue, they want to talk about the issues, they put up a big banner saying no blood for war, and hopefully they didn't get arrested there, but you know, it was important to have a place where they can actually be educated too on what's happening, and so I think it probably went very well. Anyway, I'm going to read you the poem To My Tia Chucha. The reason why I name all these things after my Tia Chucha, she was the crazy relative in my family, and so this is to honor, I guess, all our crazy relatives, because I know we all have one, and some of us, some like Robert, are the crazy relatives. No. Yeah, well, you have to be when you're a poet. No, you know, they're always like the weird one in the family. But anyway, but I think that's good. You have to honor that spirit of kind of breaking through the mold, of letting your art really lead your life, And very few people really do that. And so this is to honor all of that. This is Tia Chucha. Every few years, Tia Chucha would visit the family in a tornado of song and open us up as if we were an overripe avocado. She was a dumpy, black-haired creature of upheaval who often came unannounced with a bag of presents, including homemade perfumes and colognes that smelled something like rotting fish on a hot day at the tuna cannery. They said she was crazy. Oh, sure, she once ran out naked to catch the postman with a letter that didn't belong to us. I mean, she had this annoying habit of boarding city buses and singing at the top of her voice. One bus driver even refused to go on until she got off. But crazy? To me, she was the wisp of the wind's freedom, a music maker who once tried to teach me guitar, but ended up singing and singing, me listening and her singing, until I put the instrument down and watched the clock click the lesson time away. I didn't learn guitar, but I learned something about her craving for the new, the unbroken, so she could break it. Periodically, she banished herself from the family and was the better for it. I secretly admired Tia Chucha. She was always quick with a story, another Pepito joke. You can ask me later what a Pepito joke is. Or a handwritten lyric that she would produce regardless of the occasion. She was a despot of desire, uncontainable as a splash of water on a varnished table. I wanted to remove the layers of unnatural seeing, the way Tia Chucha beheld the world with first eyes like an infant who can discern the elixir within milk. I wanted to be one of the prizes she stuffed into her rumpled bag. I'm going to actually read you, I have a new book that came out in hardcover last year, and it's now in paperback. I actually went to Moe's bookstore down the street and found it there. I was like, cool. I'm surprised when people have my books. I don't know why. But, when I first started getting published, I don't know if anybody else did this, but the books would always be hidden behind other books, and I would always put them up in front and put them in other places and put them on desks, and it's just kind of this weird thing. But anyway, the book just came out in paperback, and it's actually short fiction, my first short story collection. But I want to read you kind of a poetic passage from it, because it has to do with writing. And matter of fact, I wrote this passage many years ago as a separate poem, and I kind of decided that it worked in the story. But I thought I would read it to you as if it were a poem. It's not really, it's a prose thing, but it was my kind of looking at writing, why writing was so important for me. And the character in the book actually is doing the same thing. Writing really is meaningful for him. So, and he's challenging himself about it because everybody in the world challenged him. Because when I became a writer in East LA, and I loved my family and I loved the people of East LA, but it really wasn't a very acceptable thing. It was a strange thing to be a writer. People were worried that I was off, like my tia, what's wrong with this guy? And because, there you're surviving. And if you got a job and you made it in a factory and you're working in a steel mill and you're in the garment industry, you made it. I was like, you good, hang on to that. And I was working in all those places and there was no soul satisfaction. And I needed to go there. Partly because my father, I saw his soul kind of completely get crushed. He was a very learned person from Mexico, got a lot of degrees, wrote books, comes to the United States and ends up working in dog factories and paint factories and selling pots and pans and Bibles in the corner. He used to sell chicharrones, down the street. And then he ends up retiring as a janitor. And I know that whatever his dream was crushed. And I kept thinking about, I didn't want that to happen to me, even if I didn't know how to not happen, how not to let it happen. So I'm going to read you this thing about writing. And got to drink a little bit here. And it goes like this. The thing is, I wanted to be a writer even before I knew what writing was about. I wanted to carve out the words that swam in the bloodstream, to press a stunted pencil onto paper so lines break free like birds in flight, to fashion words like hair, lengths and lengths of it, washed with dawn's rusting drizzle. I yearned for motor-line words, speaking in their own boasting tongues, not the diminished, frightened stammering of my childhood, to shape scorching syllables with midnight dust, words that stood up in bed, danced merengues and cumbias, that incinerated the belly like a shimmering habanera. Words with a spoonful of tears, buckshot boners, traces of garlic, cilantro, aerosol spray, and ocean froth. Words that guffawed, tarnished smooth faces, and wrung song out of silence. Words as languid as a woman's stride, as severe as a convict's gaze, herniated like a bad plan, soaked as in a summer downpour. I aspire to walk inside these words, to manipulate their internal organs, surrounded by blood, gray matter, and carceros, to slam words down like the bones of a street domino game, and to crack them in two like lovers' hearts. That was my actually, how much time do I have? There you go. I have about 5 minutes, so maybe what I'll do is I'll end with this one poem, and then give you my thanks for being here, to being so attentive, to listening, and for having this very beautiful poetry series. Thank you all for just being there for poetry. We need more poetry, a lot more, all the time, anywhere, anytime, poetry everywhere. And so I'm going to read you this last section of this one poem in my book. This is, I guess, I would call it my recovery poem. Part of my life's journey was that I was on drugs for 7 years, and then I drank for 20 years on top of that. And it led to a lot of not having relationships. It led to a lot of sabotaging, self-sabotage. It led to even not being a good father. And even though I eventually got it together, I think to a point where I could be a good father, could have a good relationship. Sometimes it was a little bit, it was late. And I went to a recovery program it's going to be 10 years in June. And I've been sober ever since then. And it's really been amazing to me. A lot more. I didn't realize how much energy there is in being sober, how much you could do creatively. And it's very hard because you're always wanting to drink again, but after almost 10 years, it's getting a little better. I named this section Notes of a Bald Cricket. It's a very long poem. It's 7 pages long. I'm not going to read the 7 pages. I'm only going to read the end. And the reason why it's called Notes of a Bald Cricket, because when I was a kid, my dad used to name all my brothers and sisters after animals or insects. My brother was called El Rano, Rano for La Rana, the frog. My one sister was La Pata, the duck. And my other sister was La Cucaracha, for the cockroach. And I was El Grillo, which is the cricket. And apparently the reason he wouldn't find qualities in the little kids when they were born, and that's why he named them. And my quality was, as soon as I started to walk, for some reason I had a little jump in my walk. I don't know why. So I was the cricket. And then in the summer times, we would, because we were living in South Central LA and Watts, and it was really hot, and if you're not careful, you'll get lice. My mom would always cut her hair like, bald, so that we wouldn't get that much lice. So then they started calling me El Grillo Pelón, the bald cricket. So over the years, that was my nickname. So I named this the Notes of a Bald Cricket, and I'm just going to read you the last section, which is kind of like an identity poem, a poem of I am, what am I doing here, and it goes through a number of images and details and a number of various things that hopefully one or two or three of them will come to you. As you know, poetry, it's meant to have to be read over and over again. You may not always get it the first time you hear it, but you're always getting some image, some detail that kind of hangs with you, and that's the one you need to hang on to as you're listening. So this poem will come in with a lot of different things, and maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 images will stay. And it goes like this. Wading through the lush of memory, through speechless sounds, seeing myself in the backhand of past lives, crumbling emotions surround me as this obsessive and irresponsible poetry man beckons to write, to tell truths. Oh, such a liar. I'm just a sleeveless jacket in a closet of worn clothes. I'm the incision of scarring verbs across the faces of all my loves. This Mexican who is a stranger in Mexico, this pocho who hates milk with his coffee, juice with his vodka, who speaks English with an East LA accent and Spanish with an East LA accent. This Tarahumara's lost son, this gravel tongue, this ghost beneath every ruin, rising like jaguar's breath in a tropical storm. All sacrifices reside in me, all jagged chests, all virgin hosts, all warrior princes, all my lynches and Guatemocs residing in my lungs, filled with the wreckage of 2 massive oceans, all bloods commingling. This Moor whose poetry stains the library walls, this armor-plated mail-wearing, sword-thrusting Andalusian who flew landward through Iberian coast and those of Sem Anahuac. I am Cortez's thigh. I am the African beard. I am the long coarse hair of Chichimeca skulls. I am Chicano poet, a musician who can't play music as a musician is a poet who works in another language. There is a mixed ecology of brews within me. I've tasted them all, still fermenting as grass-high anxieties. I am rebel's pen, rebel's son, father of revolution and verse. I am capitalism's angry Christ, Technoquetzalcoatl, toppling the temples of modern thievery, of surplus value and word art, exploited, anointed, and perhaps double-jointed. There's a brown goddess in my eye, a Guadalupana for the broken red earth. The sacred is too sacred for walled cathedrals, for incest and Baroque martyrs and vested garbs, for pulpit schemers and sweat lodge fakers and garbled spiritualists on the best-selling list. I am disciple and elder. I am rockero and hip-hop bandit, rapping Aslanese in between brick-lined texts. What do I know? What blazing knowledge can I spare? Who can burn with me and not get burned? Violence used to be great solace. Alcohol, my faithful collaborator, scratching dank words from stale corners. Now there are whole cities in my gardens. A stack of drums pulsing from my temples. Saxophone riffs streaming from the sky like a waterfall into the canyons of my body. Walls carry my name, walls in their luminant fractures. Walk with me then. Walk to the Maya. Walk with me along headstones of past loves, past plans, long gone junctures. Walk with me through the forest of collective remembering, shamed and honored by the trees. I'm no immigrant. I belong because I belong. I'm no shaggy stranger. I'm the holy villain, the outlawed saint, the most godless and therefore dearest to the mystery. Where suicide is not solution, where poems no longer puncture the fathoms, and where walking with me is to become brethren, to rain and night sweats and the betrayed. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Gracias, Camacho.